All right, Cheryl, how you
Hey,
doing?
good. How are you?
Good, good. So thanks for you're agreeing to be my guinea pig here as I've talked to you about my admiration of Joe Rogan and the podcast he has on nationally, and I thought we could do a kind of a take on that locally, and it might
Sure.
be kind of fun. So
Sure. Well, here we are. We'll see, right?
we'll see. So how's your summer been going? What have you been up to, like when it comes to civic sense or any sense?
Yeah, just I mean, it's summer being summer. I still have a lot of odds and ends and a lot of things that I'm running around doing. Basically to keep the income coming in so that the bills can get paid.
Yeah, well.
Civically, I think it's been relatively quiet, other than we are seemingly already in political season.
We are. So, what's your take on that? How do you think it started out? Has it been...
Well, it started out early to me, very early. You expect after Labor Day. I guess in a strange way, it's kind of more like it used to be when it was essentially January through May before we moved the election.
Right.
Having any election cycle start after September is very abbreviated, having run a campaign that basically started even, late into the month of September. So it's tough.
But it's weird because people I think they used to gear up, but they didn't formally they're doing formal things.
Yes.
Quicker
yes.
out of the gate than they used to.
Right, and I wonder about now, like, I'm obviously paying attention, but are other people? So is some of the effort lost? I don't know.
Right, because you would think that a big part of the thinking that why people waited before was because people are summer. I mean, I'm constantly out of the house in the summer. I mean, part of that's because I'm a teacher, but it's like how much are people really paying attention? Their kids have changed gears. Their lives have changed gears. They might be going somewhere every single weekend.
It's vacation time, just in general. Yes, people might have a summer house. So, so I don't know, but I guess if candidates are up for it, have at it.
Right.
Is kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when did Robbie announce that whole slate? Because that was the first
May
kind of cannon fire in the political season. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I guess more recently, Tiffany and Jen did.
Right. So Jen did this week.
Jen had a kickoff this week.
I went to that. You were
I
at
was there
that.
too. Yeah.
Right, and then you were at Tiffany's too, right?
I was at Tiffany's. I'm thinking.
I didn't get to check out Raul Batista's. Were you at that one?
No, I actually think I was working or something, so I would have. I would go to any of them, except again, in Hoboken, just being somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes people.
There was a time in Hoboken, and you probably remember this from when you were running, where I would go to everybody's sort of meet and greet.
Right.
Just to meet them all, like informed decisions. So.
Right.
But I guess maybe a kickoff is more. So those of you who are already on board, come.
Yeah, but I think I like a world better where it's like you're talking about, where people are free to just go and check things out. And I didn't avoid Raul Batista's for any particular reason, but then I built a better relationship with Mike Russo over the years, and would he be bent out of shape about that? So
yeah, probably not if you just told him. So just checking it out. He's
that's okay.
Pretty mellow about his, as far as I can tell, campaigning. He's just going to do what he does.
Right.
But yeah, I probably would have gone. I did see Ron's video posted. I actually liked what he had to say.
Right.
To be honest, I was a little surprised about his commentary on rent control in his kickoff.
Well, okay. Well, let's get into that, because that's your thing. That's your bread and
totally
butter. That's
thing.
how you become like a more civically involved person. So, what do you think about his take? Is it good?
Well,
is it there?
I mean, he and I had conversations, a lot of, and just from seeing his platform, it seems like he agrees with a lot of my, I think in his platform, he's sort of focusing on the enforcement quality of our existing laws and the sort of right to know, which tenants do have, but it's going through a lot of hoops to find out, what the legal rent is, and then it can be challenged, and, so but sort of generically and, just the full Hoboken landscape, I was surprised, pleased, but surprised to see somebody actually mention rent control in their kickoff, because nobody else is yet.
And what percentage would you say over the years have even acknowledged it as an issue?
Thus far in this campaign season?
Well, just in general. Like, I mean, is it atypical? Is it typical for it even to get acknowledged?
I think that sort of generically when one is asked directly, candidates will say something. The sort of message on rent control has morphed through the years. I used to get a kick out of I support rent control, but it needs to be modernized. Like that was the talking point several years ago. I'm not sure what it's going to be this year.
Right. And it's changed. And I think, I don't know, maybe, I feel, and maybe it's just because I'm so long from my renting days, it seems like people are less aware that there even is rent control in the city of Hoboken. Like,
probably.
Or new people at least. Like, I don't know if the kid that's a few years out of college that's getting their place here is even aware. Like, I was definitely aware that it existed, but...
Didn't know if it was here, yeah.
Yeah, you know, but you'd hear tales. You really, mostly what I would hear when I was younger and I first got a place here was you'd hear tales about that sweetheart deal that somebody got because they found a rent-controlled building. And you'd hear that more often in the city, but I knew that also existed.
These huge payouts, these huge, unbelievable
You did start
payouts.
hearing about that, but I don't think that I heard about until after I was already living here.
Yeah. So yeah, I didn't hear about any of that when I first moved here, and I knew certainly I moved here in the 80s.
Right.
Certainly I knew what rent control was. I knew I had moved from a place that didn't have it.
Right.
And I had learned when I got a 25% rent increase there, which was a lot less than it is today.
And what year was that?
I moved to Hoboken in in 83.
Okay.
So in like 82, I was living in Montclair and I got a 25% rent increase. And I had also simultaneously lost a roommate, so...
In Montclair you got that?
Yes, and I had called City Hall and said 25%, and they said that's based on state law, that 25, beyond that.
Because there is no rent control in Montclair.
No, just the state laws.
But there's state laws.
Yeah,
but you're allowed to override them locally.
You can, but the state law sort of loosely says an increase up to 25% is conscionable, because the state law says you...
Well, but it's fun, because there's certain laws, I mean, I know this much from law school, that there's certain laws that you can exceed, like environmental laws. Like a state can pass stricter environmental laws than the Fed, to my understanding. But like traffic enforcement, there's certain things the state, or the municipality can't cancel out the state.
Right, well, you can exceed what is considered conscionable, because the person would have to take you to court and to say, and then... Even though it's sort of a rule of thumb, 25%, it's not necessarily.
Right.
And why somebody would spend a lot of money, I don't know. I had wanted to move to Hoboken anyway, so I came here knowing there was rent control. I also came here during a time when there's still...
Oh, so you actually investigated that there was rent control because you had this pretty intense rent increase in Montclair.
Right, and knew about it. Kind of learned about Tom Olivieri, who we just recently named the park after.
Right.
Shortly thereafter. And when I first lived here, the fires... The burning the people out of their homes was still an issue. You used to get nervous.
Now, had it been going on, because that started in the 70s, right?
Long time before me, but it was still...
But it was still happening.
And to be honest with you, people who were around that day, some people who were around that day, myself included, whenever we hear a fire truck, you still think, oh my God. Like, even though we know there's that's not what's happening.
That was one of the first things, like, there's certain things that I feel like I knew about as a Hoboken resident, and then there were certain things that just... Right away, the second I was, running for office as part of a slate, you started to hear about. And that was one of those things. Like, I don't think I even knew about those fires before I ran for office, but once I ran for office, like, you instantly heard about it. You heard about it from a lot of people.
But even nowadays, even if, like, somebody new moving in town who doesn't know we're rent controlled, I also think to some extent, if you said Hoboken has rent control, they wouldn't really know what that meant either. Right. Some, everybody's different.
Well, that's the thing I think might have changed. But so when did you first get involved in the whole rent control thing? Like when was your first time that you what was that first issue or that first thing that got you to attend a city council meeting, got you to start paying attention? Like what was it?
I'm trying to think, because I attended them fairly from the beginning, and I do remember that the chamber used to be always packed, always. It wasn't just an item, and you had to. I mean, there was obviously no social media, so you either there or you read the Hoboken Reporter.
Right, which
but
was probably suspect as to what they would cover and not cover.
Yeah, I think it was probably what got me involved. If I really think back, I was crossing the street on 3rd Street in the late 80s.
Right.
And I happened to bump into this guy who was Dan Thompson, although I didn't know him at the time.
Okay. And
he said to me... And we started chatting, as Dan Thompson to this day will.
Right.
And he told me that there was a meeting of what it was called then, SHA, or it was an early iteration of what FBW became.
Okay.
I think it might have been Coalition for a Better Waterfront. I can't remember that.
Because he was pretty involved with FBW back in the day, right?
Well, he wasn't involved with FBW. He was involved in the early iteration of. By the time he became FBW, I don't think Dan was really involved anymore.
Right. But he was involved in these root organizations that turned into that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And actually, Dan Thompson, I don't know, no, you might not have, but there is an unreleased film about the waterfront referendum.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the same film director who did Delivered Vacant, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
And it was never released, and it was never fully edited, but it is a full film from beginning to end with like one or two editing glitches.
I wonder why she's sitting on that, because
I don't know, but she showed it here.
I think it'd be beneficial to just get it out there.
We showed it at Hoboken Fair Housing Association. The room was packed. Nora, the film director, happened to be in the area, so she came to speak.
Oh, that's awesome.
About it, and it was a terrific night. But if you ever watch that film, and I'd love for you to see it.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
You can see that Dan Thompson was really the person who was largely the most involved in the waterfront referendum.
Okay.
Certainly Rod Hine was involved. I was involved. And
Right.
so it was this sort of chance meeting on the street with Dan Thompson, and he was going to a meeting either that night or the next night, and invited me to come. And it was going to be at Seda Fretz's house, and you might recall that name because Seda Fretz has passed away a couple of years ago.
I don't think I do know.
You're going to remember in a second.
Okay.
Because her heirs wanted to make that home
I do, yes.
a community
okay,
land
so
trust.
that's the back, because I remember you telling me at the time
Yes.
that they were big on doing that because she had always been involved in wreck control fights and things like that.
Well, she certainly supported it, and as long as they got a reasonable
sell price.
Yeah,
Or
for it.
giving it away.
Yeah, they weren't going to give it away for free, and they certainly couldn't. I had conversations with Councilman Doyle at the time when I was trying to get the former mayor to act upon this. I wasn't the only one, and we had these conversations about, the CLT, the State of France CLT home or something like that.
Sure.
So that, and it's, some of the very originals were there, some people who have moved away that night. And that was probably my very first involvement with anything. And then I had a clipboard and was collecting
Did you already know Mary at that point? Because I know a lot of people that are in the know and had done any of the stuff that I've done over the past decade. Like they don't get to know any one of you. They get to know all three of you.
Kind of, but no, I didn't know Mary then. And another little sort of interesting tidbit about the waterfront unreleased film is in that film on camera, Dan and Mary literally met for the first time.
Oh, really?
So you see it, yeah. It's like, it's like
cool.
wow. But no, I actually didn't meet Mary until many years later when Dan Thompson ran for mayor.
Who's lived here longest of the three of you? Like, who was the first one? Dan?
Dan, 76, 78.
Okay, wow.
Like
he was really a trailblazer.
Yes,
then.
yeah.
And did he grow up in this area?
No, I believe that Dan grew up in West Virginia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I would have never guessed that.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Something he's private school educated. He went off to London.
Okay.
Lived there for a while, and he met somebody there.
Did he go to school in London?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I know he went to Exeter. That's undergrad, right?
Right.
I know he went to some university in Chicago, California, and then later he got his doctorate in Stevens, his PhD.
Oh, okay. So that's what brought him to Hoboken.
Well, somebody actually in a bar or restaurant in London said, you should check out this place, Hoboken. There's a job in New York.
Okay.
So, yeah, he sort of heard about it when he was...
That's wild.
Yeah.
Really back in the day.
Really back in the day.
Right.
I heard about it... I think I had a friend who moved here, and I used to go to Maxwell's.
Right,
So,
when it was really Maxwell's.
When it was really Maxwell's.
Did it look totally different back then?
Yeah, it was.
Because when I moved here, it was when they had turned it into like a coffee house.
Yeah.
Was it always a coffee house, or?
No, it was a bar front and music in the back, and then for a while it was like.
Was the music always just in the back room, or did they ever take up the full space with the music?
I don't remember. I think there was a time when there were. I seem to have a memory of music up front, but I don't know if it was just that night or always.
Because I love those old clips. Like I think I've seen a clip of the Replacements and of Nirvana, and then everybody knows the Bruce Springsteen video.
Yes, of course, yeah. And
cool.
who did I? They Might Be Giants. I don't know if you know them.
No,
they were there. Yeah.
All right, that's cool.
They actually there was a short Channel 9 News talking about the music scene in Hoboken.
Right.
The night I think I could be smashing different. It was the 80s after all, different things together. But I think it was them, and they were like filming the music scene in Hoboken.
Right.
But I could never find that clip again. So some of my friends are in it dancing.
It's super cool. I mean, I put out a post a while back saying, like, we have a really good music history here, and it's a shame that it's not being, highlighted a little bit better.
Right.
Because, I mean, it's one thing, I mean, Maxwell's isn't there, but CBGB isn't there anymore. So, maybe it's just inevitable that place would disappear, but we should at least have a plaque or something that memorializes this.
Something, just maybe even, sort of promote the idea through something. I don't know if it would be a community place, or it would be lovely if we could have another, bar come back. But I don't know. Maybe there isn't the audience for it here anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there might not be, but I mean, you're seeing that more in Jersey City with the White Eagle Hall or something like that.
The people who
have you been over there?
Have not been over there. But look, we drew tremendous crowds for the couple of Dylan and the other.
Yeah, Mumford and Sons.
Yeah, so I know they're big names. Yeah. But there was a huger crowd than any bar needs.
Well, you know why that's not being done anymore, right?
I'm not sure because I've heard different stories.
That's not being done anymore because the pier's getting eaten away, and I think it's definitely like a preponderance of caution that they're not putting shows on there.
Well, but
they're worried because, like, you ever have a show on there, you get thousands of people out there, and then suddenly,
right. Well, that was my concern in the first place. But I've also heard that because I don't know, Homeland Security issues too. That
I'm sure that's something. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a unique thing. I mean, I used to be on the Public Safety Committee, and without getting into any details, I think it's always a concern. It's a little trickier because, when you're New York City, you're one big police force in the end of the day, and over here you're coordinating these different municipalities. And I think they just, if nothing else, it probably makes them feel a little more vulnerable because maybe somebody will think that's a weakness, even if it isn't really a weakness. And,
it's kind of a shame, really. Yeah. It's come to that in society.
But I'm not sure, like, which mix it is. I know there's definitely, because there's issues with who's going to pay for reinforcing the columns.
Right.
Whether the Port Authority would pay for that whole, trust that exists. I don't know, trust isn't the right word, but you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who's going to pay for it? And there's money allotted into the maintenance of the surface park. And I think the debate is always like whether that money can be diverted to the underground, or whether it's all considered the same thing. And I think the Port Authority and the different landlords over there, they kind of balk at that. So
it would be a shame if we had to shut it down.
Yeah. But nonetheless, it was cool that we had those concerts there, and there's a great music history here.
Sure.
I mean, you look at Hair being penned here on Washington Street, and Sinatra, of course, and all that stuff. I mean, it's a pretty good history. Mm-hmm. And there's that Bar None label. Do you know anything about them?
Yeah, they used to have a studio here in Hoboken.
Yeah, and I think they still exist.
They still do? Yeah. I don't know if they're still here, are they? I mean...
I think they are. I think they are. And then, I was thrilled when, Yo La Tengo? The main guy came up and spoke at a meeting.
Yeah.
And I remember just being like, the music fan in me came out, and I'm just like...
Oh, this is major cool,
This is very cool that this guy's coming to a meeting, because he was talking about Newman Leather, and he was just, talking about how they should let it get knocked down when they used to always talk about knocking it down.
Well, we still have tunes.
We still have tunes.
Yeah.
And I will buy the obligatory album there just to keep them going.
Business,
I mean, I have my iTunes subscription now, which probably saves me hundreds of dollars, but I'll go over there and just get a nice final reissue or a piece of used vinyl.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of record stores became antiques. I also do, of course, remember Pure Platters.
Was that in Hoboken? I've never even heard of that place.
It was on Newark Street. I'm just trying to remember which. And I know Rejuice Nation isn't there anymore, but I think it was like over in that area. Now that's a CB. Yeah, and I was certainly in there a lot more because we didn't have iTunes and Spotify back then. You could buy tickets for Maxwell's at Pure Platters.
Right. Yeah. And that was a long time ago, Pure Platters?
Quite some time ago, yes.
Because I know I think there was another record store there more recently. And then there was definitely one when I first moved here, like we're talking over 20 years ago. I think there was in one of those spaces on Washington Street where you actually had to walk down into it, like a basement level place. There was a little but I don't think it lasted for long. So, yeah. I mean, the music scene was already basically going away when I moved here.
Yeah, I don't really know if we have. Well, I don't know if you saw the council meeting, but a couple of residents spoke. One of them is a musician. Still, that's what she does.
This is the last meeting you're talking about?
A couple of meetings back. I'll give her a plug, Karen Cool.
Okay.
Check her out.
I will.
But she spoke at a council meeting, and she was saying that recently Jersey City had done an event which was Women in Music in Hoboken, or I'm not sure the exact title. and she spoke at the council meeting saying that she was the only one who still actually lived in Hoboken. So,
Right.
and there were other performers there who had, but they're not here anymore. So, yeah, I mean, I guess seeing this through the years, starting with the fires to, every other word out of my mouth is affordability and displacement.
Right.
It's sad because I do think that when the fires stopped, it didn't mean the displacement stopped, and we did, a lot of.
And in a lot of ways, that's the generation. I mean, there's almost like two prongs of people that get displaced. There's the people that were living here and have always been living here, and they're getting displaced because, maybe they didn't know. Maybe they were always renters, and as the place has become just so ultra more expensive than it was a few decades ago, they're getting displaced. But then you also have the people that they weren't born and raised in Hoboken, but they moved here when it was artsy and cheap, and that's what made it. That's what made it artsy. Was that the artists, always seek out the hip neighborhoods that are cheaper,
Exactly.
and they're being priced out too. So it's like these two groups of people. You have a born and raised contingent, and then you have a
right.
We were the first wave of non-born and raised, but we weren't made of money. We weren't investment bankers.
Right.
Like people.
Well, we moved into a place we could afford. That's
right.
I mean, that's kind of the sad thing about it because by and large, I sit on the rent board,
Right.
so I can tell you that by and large, our rents, they're those very, very, very low rents.
Right.
There's very, very few of them.
Yeah.
And probably with rare exception, there are people who've been here a very, very long time. But there is a lot of anger, I think. I mean, I've sat at the rent board where an attorney for a landlord has said, this rent is interesting. This rent it's a taking. Like the rent is so low, it's a taking. So there's that feeling.
Right.
Interestingly, I don't know if and we should probably move on to another topic, but
Yeah. Well, but I want to talk about this. So, go ahead.
Yeah. So a while ago, there was you may have read that there was a Supreme Court ruling about a carriage house on Court Street.
Dusting off the memory.
Vaguely, where there was a woman who
that was when
there.
I was still on the council, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the owner won in court because even though it was on the same lot, so technically it had always been done that unit was attached to the other 5 units on Washington Street, but the Supreme Court ruled because it was a separate
building.
building.
The New Jersey Supreme Court.
Yes.
Right.
That an owner who wanted to occupy
Right.
could remove that tenant, could evict, whatever the word is you wanted to. It would be legal.
Yeah, my wife and I had that happen to us. It's like you're allowed to
Yes.
displace a tenant if it's you moving in.
Into a 3
Yeah, we had a landlord who did that because she was going to retire.
And move in. Yeah.
And I guess she wanted to live in the unit for probably tax purposes when she sold it, because I guess you take less of a tax hit if you sell your primary residence.
Yeah.
So she basically booted us from an apartment that we loved.
But it was legal, yeah.
It was
so
legal.
that unit was before the rent board. It's actually carried. We heard it, but it might come back. But the new landlord. There's a new owner. The lawyer representing was talking about how it was almost like inconceivable that any rent could be that low. So it's one of the things that the rent board is dealing with right now.
Well, so let's talk then about, you've done this, you had introduced me to the whole CLT concept.
Yeah.
How do you think that's going?
I feel like I'm spinning my wheels.
I know how you're going to pretty much answer that, but because the thing I wonder about is that, you've gotten pretty good. You're one of those people in Hoboken that has gotten pretty good at, you can make noise around an issue, and to the point where it has to be addressed. But there's a difference between being addressed where people just acknowledge it, and maybe sit down and have a meeting with somebody who has some expertise on it. That's a far and away different than actually enacting something and bringing in a CLT and trying to do it. So where is it at? Is it just in this limbo where people give you a nod and a wink and say, "Oh yeah, we're going to try"?
We like that. It's a great idea. Right. Well, first of all, it's appearing in a lot of campaign platforms. I will say that.
Which is always an important thing to get done in a campaign season.
Yes, and I also, I probably have half articulated this occasionally at council meetings, and people probably don't know what I'm talking about. But New Jersey Appleseed, the executive director, Renee Steinhagen, has represented several different community organizations in Hoboken through the years.
Right.
She represents FPW on the Monarch right now.
Okay.
As an intervening entity. They're an intervener in that case.
Right.
She represented Hoboken.
Now, is she an attorney or she just runs the
She is
organization?
an attorney, and she represented the Hoboken Fair Housing Association when there was the attempt to decertify the last rent control referendum result,
Right.
which also, I think, largely led to what's recently happened with the court case with Frank Rea and
Right.
all that. But anyway, she, as an attorney and an executive director for that organization, the New Jersey chapter, has interest now in doing less litigation and more working with community groups for them to realize their aspirations.
Right.
So she has taken it, taken it upon herself to work with one of her board members from Carter and English, a law firm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was one of the biggest in New Jersey.
Exactly, and they are currently working on how Hoboken can best do this, what structure makes sense, as well as answering questions that the city may have.
Right.
Some of us, Councilman Falco, Councilman Fisher, Giattino, and Councilman Doyle, and a couple of community people who are sort of interested in affordable housing,
Right.
met with her and Director Brown recently and just posed all the questions that we needed.
Sorry, you told me about that. That was real recent, like a month or two ago?
A couple of months ago,
Okay.
yeah. I seeing CLTs show up everywhere in the campaign literature. I spoke with her yesterday and I said, well, this might be a good time to check in with McCarter to see if they can finish
Right.
before November, because if we're all so in support of it, I would hate for it to appear in everybody's campaign literature
Right.
and then it goes
But
away.
they even seem to know what it is, because I sometimes
I
doubt
know.
if I know what it is. Because tell me if I'm wrong. What I perceive it as being is that you would own a piece of property, somebody could buy it, and they could live in it till they pass away, right? But that they could only sell it back to the community land trust.
Exactly.
And so it could never be like you get this windfall for your heirs.
Never.
Because you could never sell it to your heirs, it has to be sold back into the community land trust.
Right.
and
Well,
get it
the
recycled.
trust.
But you would have title. You'd have legal title to it.
Right. Well, you
It
own
would be like a
those-
life estate.
Basically, the community land trust owns the underlying land,
Right.
and the property, whether it's a multifamily, single family, whatever portion of something. Because we asked about could portions of other developments be included.
Right.
That's one of our questions. The trust owns the land, so yes, you are there, you
Mhm.
hold title, but if it's a rental, the rent is paid into the trust. If
Mhm.
it's sold, it's sold. It's essentially sold into the trust, and somebody else can buy it.
Mm-hmm.
And the increase is nominal. It has more to do with CPIs and things like that. So it's
Right.
not like you sell it for what you bought it for, but you might sell it for, if you lived there 10 years, you might sell it for 15 or 20,000.
Right. But it's like some cap percentage of how much they could be sold for.
Right.
Right. They've done that in New York, haven't they? I mean, have they done it? I know every
If they
state
haven't,
has
they're
different
doing
laws.
it now.
Okay.
Somebody told me there is a community land trust in the Chinatown area.
Okay.
Because I had worried, and I think other people worry because the real estate is so expensive in Hoboken.
Sure.
Often CLTs are put in areas that need rehabilitation,
Right.
abandoned properties, or So I had asked some of the national. They have a new name now, but the National Community Land Trust Org and some other organizations around the country focused on this. Can it really work here?
Right.
That's everybody's question. And they said, yes, the short answer.
Right.
The longer answer is get in touch with the Community Land Trust in Chinatown, because
Oh,
it's a
okay.
very good sort of parallel line to
Right.
Hoboken. Small area,
Right.
expensive property, and
Yeah,
they're
I'm
doing
sure it's not cheap in China.
it's probably more than ours.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I think people almost assume, or I probably assume, that just because it's still a heavily recent arrival immigrant community, that's going to be cheaper. But that's not necessarily the
No,
case,
no,
especially
it's-
from China. Because
yeah.
I'm sure people come over here with a lot of money from China.
Yeah, right.
nowadays.
And they did a long time ago too. It
Yeah,
bought them
yeah.
cheaper.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Exactly.
it would work here. The question is, which McCarter and English is looking at, is it sort of a department in City Hall? Is it a quasi-governmental sort of like the parking utility?
Right.
Or is it a non-profit organization that can receive funding through city grants?
Right.
I do believe that Renee thinks it should be the non-profit, hands down.
Yeah.
But we're going to see, and part of that is she's concerned. She doesn't live here, but she's concerned about our history of affordable options available in Hoboken.
Right.
You have to,
Now, I didn't realize it could be rentals. I thought it was just an ownership option.
Mm-hmm.
So, how is it different from what we do in the housing authority? Because like I'm the chair over there, and we've set up a nonprofit because we're trying to get the RAD money, and the RAD money is it's per unit, probably a higher amount of money from the Fed. And what you're doing is you're basically doing vouchers, but you can do it to your own properties. You just have to set them up for
Right.
this program. And I don't understand all the logistics of it, but our lawyer luckily does. And when we're taking the baby steps by doing it in Fox Hills first, because Fox Hill is our building that needs the least work. So we're kind of learning how to do it with that.
And I don't know a lot about the structures of authorities, but can they receive private money, or is it all federal, state?
Well, you can borrow money in ways that you wouldn't legally allow to as a housing authority. So you have that advantage,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have the advantage of that. I believe like the math will always work out where you're going to get more money per unit, because let's face it, down in
Sure.
DC, private landowners who take vouchers always have a lot more leverage than the old traditional housing authorities that are running their own properties. So they always
take it
make
as-
sure that the
yeah.
money isn't cut as much as it is. Like
Sure.
we still only got 90-something% of the budget we needed from the Fed, but that was a couple percentage points higher, so we're delighted. But,
Right. But it's still not enough. Yeah, I mean, see, I think, and I could be totally wrong about this, because I don't know the other side of it, but the funding sources are much broader in a CLT. And the other thing is, I think in housing authorities, very strict, at least at this point, regional income limits, things like that. And I think that there could be more flexibility, but it would be too much effort just based on a new Supreme Court ruling.
So you mean like going beyond the income limits that we have?
We could, if we were, and this is another thing that I talk about endlessly, if we actually looked at what our population needs in terms of housing, where is it families? Is it senior couples? Is it individual seniors?
Right.
Is it artists? Whatever. You can, create different pockets in the CLT.
Right.
This 10% here is for very low income, Hoboken very low income, which is different than regional.
Right.
This one here is over 55. I think that, because a community land trust has a board, so maybe they could have the data to do it based on our.
And they wouldn't have the limits, because the federal
Yes.
government is, the federal housing authority, even though there's some ways it's implemented by the state, but it's federal money at the end of the day.
Right.
And you have HUD, you have the HUD office in Newark that we'll deal with, which is a federal office. You're not necessarily going to have those limits. You probably have more flexibility.
Right. Well, you still have to be able to prove. You have to be able to prove that, and I'll just use the over 55, because that doesn't really exist in traditional housing authorities.
Right.
If we found out, hey, look, we have, this percentage of the population, their average income is $46,000.
Right.
They live in multifamily buildings, half of which are on the market right now. And here we're going to buy a multifamily building that has 4 units. In order to say we want this to be an over 55, these 4 units, the city has to have the data to show that meets a need, as opposed to somebody's connected aunts and uncles.
Well, yeah, and that's always the worry.
Yeah.
But we do have senior housing, but I guess the
Yes.
difference is you probably have the flexibility to go to. All right, so you could go younger, or you could go probably at a higher income level than we can serve.
Right, exactly.
Because there's a lot of people don't know. I think there's 3 tiers of income levels that we can serve as a federal housing authority, and the top tier you're almost disincentivized from servicing it, because once you bring in somebody at that top tier, it's something about, like, if they move, you start really kind of undermining your finances.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I really don't understand the details of why, but that's how I've always understood it, that you're kind of like, you're
better off
kind
if
of
you get-
hurting
yeah.
yourself by servicing that upper third, because if they leave, maybe you get less money per
Like from the
unit,
get-
and it doesn't adjust back down if you bring in somebody lower income. I'm not sure the
But
details.
that's actually a really critical piece of information,
Oh,
because
it is.
if the top tier is the one, that doesn't make sense. In coordination with the housing authority, the CLT could go for the top tier.
Yes, right, when it
Yeah.
fills a need. I mean,
Yeah.
heck, in Hoboken, there's probably a need for tiers that are totally off the charts, because
Well, that's the other-
we've
yeah.
really become a city of haves and have-nots.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't in a million years afford to live here
Me
if I
either.
hadn't bought 12, 13 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, 14 years ago at this point. So it's just gotten that crazy.
Well, there's also the gap between the highest tier for any sort of affordable housing and the lowest tier of market.
Right.
That's like, if you look at in East Orange, for example,
Mm-hmm.
I have
Okay.
that, like, and I'm going to just use round numbers. Let's just say the highest tier for an affordable 1-bedroom in East Orange is $700. The market cost for a 1-bedroom, if you were out of that, is, let's say, $900. So there's a $200 distance that you have to traverse to get
Right.
yourself from this situation into the outside of subsidies. In Hoboken, it may be, you may be traversing from 700 to 1900.
Right.
So there's not even a forward trajectory up
Right.
for people at the bottom.
Right. No, it's definitely a unique situation. And,
Yeah.
I mean, it's happening in Jersey City, but Jersey City's so huge.
They
And
have
it's just going neighborhood by neighborhood. Because like where I taught this last year out in Greenville, it's still, I don't think it's got astronomical costs. I mean, an urban area is always more expensive, even in an area that's
Right.
not wealthy, but
Yeah, we have
it's
unique
definitely
problems.
going neighborhood by neighborhood.
Right,
over
but
Jersey City,
we have unique problems because we have a lot of needs that haven't been met,
right?
or need to be met.
Right.
Maybe they didn't exist and that's why they haven't. But
Well, we're also such a small community that it's hard to service everything you need to service. I mean, Jersey City does have that advantage of size,
yes,
where they can do different things. I mean, just even from like a business standpoint, the fact that they have a few car dealerships. I recently bought a new vehicle, and there's car dealerships in Jersey City.
Right,
There's
right.
big box stores, there's strip malls, and then there's communities that look just like Hoboken. You would
Right.
barely know you're not in Hoboken. There's just the diversity. There's malls, and then there's also like quaint little mom and pop areas with tons
Right.
of commercial. It's just we're almost limited by our size because we're this unique place that we are in many ways a city, and we are incorporated as a city, and we have that form of government, but then we're small. We're very small
Very
for a
small,
city.
yeah.
We're Jersey City. If you took Jersey City and plopped it somewhere else in the country, it would be a significant dot on the map.
sure,
You know.
yeah, and we don't have that much available land that's city owned to do anything with anyway. So, how do you? It's tough. It's
Yeah.
tough for our elected officials. I don't envy them in that.
Yeah, no, that is tough. It is a tough thing about it. So, what do you think about this election season? If it's going to take a good tone or not?
I would not bet that it's going to take a good tone.
Yeah, because I mean the tone. I don't know. You and I discussed this, and the tone. I think one of the biggest problems with the tone is there's a little bit. I'm not comfortable with how much of a reflection of the national stuff that's going on, and it seems like everybody's trying to pigeonhole everybody into something, and it's a shame because what was it, Tip O'Neill who said all politics are local,
Yeah.
and it's almost like they're going in the reverse direction. Because instead of letting the local drive the national,
Yeah.
we're getting more and more into where these national issues, I'm getting afraid that the local leaders are just worried about that, and they're not worried about the local nuts and bolts, getting the trains in on time, the unique issues that are going on locally, and they're just campaigning on a reflection of national issues when
Right.
that's kind of silly because
It's very silly, but I wonder, because I totally agree with you on that. And I think in the last election there was a lot of discussion
There
of
was
the
a ton.
national
There was a
issues.
ton.
Yeah. Is that how you're capturing a newer population who don't think about, well, should we eminent domain this or should we not to make a park?
Right.
Should we make, like, if maybe a newer population hasn't focused that until something, until they're ensconced in the community or something happens.
Right.
Like a big building that's going to block their windows is going up. Those kind of things or they get displaced or whatever it is.
Right.
So, and our elections are in November now. They're not
They are.
separate.
They are.
So I think that's sad, and I would personally be more likely to vote for the person who seemed to have a good grasp on Hoboken's issues.
Right, because that's what should matter in
Right.
a local election. I mean, you'd think. I mean, it's really, does it matter? I don't know, does it matter what you feel? You know, I mean, there's, like, I'll give the global warming example. It's been talked about in some of the campaigns. I've heard it being talked about, and it should be. I mean, Hoboken is about as susceptible to the effects of global warming as possible.
As you can possibly, yeah.
But then the way people are talking about it is like, they seem to be talking about it on a national level. Like, but yeah, you should be talking about the rebuild by design. I mean, I think that's one of the best things Dawn did, was bringing in that rebuild by design.
Yes.
But even that, like, I know people who are super concerned about global warming, are
As we
hardcore
should all be,
environmentalists.
yeah.
But they're still also, they put their local hat on, and they're like, but who's going to pay to maintain this thing? Like, we're building this engineering marvel to try to block the water, and is it the taxpayer that's going to be, holding the bag for maintaining this extremely expensive piece of engineering and infrastructure?
Yeah, probably.
And I mean, I've heard die-hard environmentalists who are still concerned about that, because they're like, what the heck is this going to potentially do to my taxes?
Yeah, they should be, and they should ask the questions, even though it's a very good thing. But there are a lot of times, not a lot of times, but there certainly can be, and I'm going to take out a recent example and put it on the table because it just happened this week, where there are the hidden costs and the questions need to be answered. There's a potential Monarch settlement.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all I have seen is the press release.
Right.
I'd
Which
like to, yeah.
Really doesn't tell you much.
Right.
in the grand
But
scheme
the
of things.
settlement agreement better include the fact that should we do this,
Right.
and should we own that dilapidated pier
Right.
that's not suitable for anything right now, that we, as the property owner, we, the city of Hoboken, as the property owner, are required by state law to put in a walkway.
Right.
Are darn.
Right.
So unless that's covered, and this is like my big, and I don't know, maybe it is there. So I will read it when it comes up on the council agenda to make sure. But if it's not,
But it's not. And what from the press release, what you'd see is that there's been nothing negotiated. They're going
Right.
to have a settlement agreement to, I guess, make a commitment to negotiate something.
in the back room,
That's a whole other thing. Like, is the council going to get involved in that? Is
right?
that going to be
Where's the
strictly an
community
administrative
involvement?
thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I am worried because of it's awful when politics. I mean, people who pay attention to local politics, they're all in.
Right.
And I do have a concern if the questions aren't answered in that settlement agreement,
Mm-hmm.
that the right thing for the community is to not say yes.
Or at least get back to the negotiation table and not negotiate it, because the big end result of not building on the Monarch pier, but not building the Monarch, is great. I think everybody's for that. But how you do it,
Right,
there's
right.
the devil's
If you
in the
can't do
details
it
of how
right-
you do it.
If
And-
you can't do it right, you're gonna hurt Hoboken one way or the other. So the specifics need to be in there. The community involvement, the transparency.
And I think you can do it right, but it's whether it will be.
We have
done
to
right.
see if it is.
I think everything's there to do it right, as long as, and they're businessmen. They're gonna, as long as they profit, as long as they monetize their
They're
investment.
businessmen.
Yes,
We're not.
but we're not. Which is, that's the important thing.
Right now, well, look, can't really get too far into it because I haven't, but my biggest fear is that those details, the devil is in the details,
Mhm.
the stage one, not the size of the, not the stage two of the actual redevelopment plan, but the settlement agreement. That needs details, and that needs protection.
And that needs lawyers interpreting the heck out of that thing, because all the public's going to see is we have avoided the Monarch getting developed, which is a great thing. But it's like the original thing when I was on the council that was put forward. People were like, I mean, it's funny because when it came to vote, everybody was on the side I was on, but I was behind closed doors, and Mike Russo was behind closed doors saying, like, no way, you're not gonna. I mean, we don't want to see the Monarch built. Absolutely, I mean, that's a citywide issue, and we don't want to see our waterfront spoiled like that. But he and I, in particular, had spent more than 2 years down in that neighborhood, ironing out this whole Bijou thing. You were at those
Yeah.
public meetings
Yes.
where we we eventually got a lot of the people in that neighborhood to kind of turn away from the big building and say, but we are getting a lot of public benefits, we know what could have been built here, and they got on board. And then I was not going to be supportive of anything that suddenly threw a building bigger than the Bijou building.
Yeah.
On top of them, after they had tolerated that with at least a ton of givebacks, we got a ton of givebacks on that. What givebacks were we getting? Yeah, we were avoiding the building on the waterfront, but it was like pitting one neighborhood against another. So that was the devil in the details. And then another detail was that those that applied or Iron State, whatever they're calling themselves in that particular matter of their entity, you know, they would have wanted control over what they built there. They wouldn't have wanted the redevelopment committee or any committee on the council so there was it's not a redevelopment agency. They wouldn't have wanted them to be able to tell them what they wanted to build, and they wanted to build those micro units.
Okay.
And before this deal came up, they came in front of the committee I chaired, and they wanted to build these little micro units, these small micro units, because I remember I think it was Dean Marchetta said to me, he knew my thing was the 3-bedroom units. I want more 3-bedroom units so families can stay here. And he goes, Mello, did you notice all these 3-bedroom units? And I'm paraphrasing here, but I was like, these little things, these are 3-bedroom units? And I think they were smaller than my 2-bedroom, which is not a very big 2-bedroom. And it's like, come on. And they built that, I think it's called Irby or something.
Sure.
Over
I
Jersey
actually hear
City.
it's nice.
I'm sure it is nice, but it's basically a glorified dorm for people right out of college. And it's very small, it's these small micro units. And I don't think with our infrastructure that we could have taken that. So that actually offended me more than all the density that would have been absorbed by that neighborhood, is that they would have gotten this plethora of micro units in that building, and we wouldn't have been able to tell them no. And they're already like, the lines are ridiculous for the buses, and people always overstate the light rail's capacity and what it can do, and how convenient it is and how well it runs, and it just seemed like a bad deal. So like, you know, I'm behind the scenes going, no way. And I know Mike Russo was saying no way, but everybody else wasn't necessarily saying no way, and not everybody else, but some people. And we won't get into names, but that's what I worry about with this, is that people are going to get carried away, because that it's definitely a better deal to put the density over on Observer, and I think you could absolutely do a good deal with putting the density over on Observer, and you avoid what we all want to avoid, which is building the Monarch. But how it's done
and what it is
could bite us.
But yeah, I mean, even before we get to that part of it, the plan part of it, I'm worried about not ensuring the public meetings that you guys had.
Right.
You know, I think we had a situation with the Hilton where we didn't have that option.
No, absolutely.
So,
like how public is the process going to be? I mean, you can only keep that so public. I mean, we were negotiating the hard details on our own, but then we would always say, hey, before we pull the trigger, we're going to have a public meeting. And that changed it dramatically. We were going to build on the L-shaped park that just opened up recently. We were going to build on where the playground is and on the northerly piece of the L. And that's where the building was going to be. And Larry Bijou didn't even own the property that he's building the building. That was another person that was coming in front of the committee I chaired, and they were talking about a building there, and they were going to have a theater in it. That was their big give back for all sorts of density. So, you know, that public process changed that project dramatically. Because we responded to the public, and you know, it changed it dramatically. So I'm worried that they're going to avoid a public process for this.
Well, but I'm going to take that a step further, because yes, I'm worried about that. I'm also worried, and I think that I've seen, I mean, Councilman DeFusco put out a somewhat supportive, not press release, but Facebook post. So you know, it wasn't very specific.
It matters nowadays in the days of our tweeting president.
But I'm worried that you can support this, like this concept. I'm worried that because politics is infused so much, that there's going to be a torrent of people packing the council chambers, and the pressure during political season may cause the council to acquiesce
to a bad deal.
Because of the politics, rather than have somebody say, wait a minute, kind of what you were saying about the original.
By Jackson Street,
I support this, but hey, folks, this does not cover the cost of the walkway. You know, like something.
And the thing we had in our advantage, not only was it was just fraught with error, the idea of moving the density back to that neighborhood. It's definitely better in concept to move the density along Observer Highway, right? but it was in the fall, but it wasn't an election fall. There was
Right,
not a municipal
right.
election going on.
Right.
And you're right. If they quickly get to the negotiation table, and they negotiate a bad deal,
Well, there is a settlement agreement now.
Yeah,
I mean,
isn't the settlement? That's the thing. Like, I want to know, what is that settlement agreement? Is it
Right.
strictly
Well, I
that
think
we will absolutely have negotiations, or it cancels out the settlement agreement? I mean,
I don't know. I think that the mayor was up at the T building.
Mhm.
The people who, I guess it would be in front of their property. He was explaining it to them. I don't know if they've seen it yet.
right.
But it's going to be supposedly on the August 7th city council meeting, which is very soon in the offing. Can, get that information out, because I know I'll read it.
Right.
But I also do recall being at the meeting where the Hilton was voted on.
Mm-hmm.
You were there, I was
Right.
there. Very packed room.
Yeah.
And about 6 dissenting, thoughtful, I might say, voices.
Yeah.
And for various reasons. And I'm afraid of that. I do think that the council should listen to the will. If the council chamber is packed, you
Right.
listen. But I don't ever want that council chamber astroturfed packed.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's a good example, because that was definitely one where people got it. It almost took on a PR air, and it was the density was being increased. I was like, why? Why are we increasing the density? Because I was always personally for a big enough space that it could hold corporate meetings and people could have their weddings there. I think we probably had per capita the highest percentage of engaged couples in the state.
Right.
That would be my guess.
Right. That's a pretty good
and
guess.
we haven't been able to have the corporate meetings. Like, I know that for my wife. Like, she used to work for an organization that had an office in Princeton and an office in New York, and they would once a year have nearly a week-long set of meetings. And to save money over New York prices, they got a hotel in Jersey City, and they could never consider Hoboken because the W doesn't quite have that type of space.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, when the Super Bowl was here, both NFL teams stayed in Jersey City hotels, because there's a zillion meetings and Super Bowl lead-up week, and they just don't have the space. So, like,
Right.
I think it'd be good to have that space. I think it'd be good to have a corporate brand, because there's business travelers that like the predictability of the Hiltons and the Marriotts and the corporate brands.
They have the Hilton passport. They're.
But it's more for predictability. Like, I know my brother, had a big job in IBM where he had a meeting somewhere in Europe, and he kind of rented with his traveler heart. Not rented, but he got a room with his traveler heart.
Yeah.
But then the businessman was trying to get prepared for a meeting, and his Wi-Fi wasn't working, and he's like, I'm going to go. I think he went Hilton, but he wanted to go with a big, predictable brand from that.
Right.
So I was for that, but like, I didn't want it to be any bigger than was required to have like that event space where people could have weddings, those corporate meetings where you could get the big corporate events and the week-long events, and it seemed to go beyond that, and that's where. The givebacks were nice.
Well, it went beyond
but were they worth all that? And then it seemed like people were being made to believe that, we're going to get a pool and we're going to get a refurbished Y. I've been told by people that money would have basically covered the engineering studies.
Probably, yeah. I've heard too.
It wouldn't have covered any real renovation.
Yeah.
It would have just covered like the plans and all that.
Well, that's
which can get quite
the
expensive.
PR again. But now I'm going to go a little further with the Hilton. And I put this out there because earlier I said enthusiastically that CLTs are in a lot of campaign literature.
Right.
During the mayoral, we saw campaign literature about boutique hotels and okay. So and then it's the mayor, who was a candidate at the time, who was the one who was saying boutique, who actually makes it bigger. So cautionary tale
and
to
he
everybody
backed away
voting,
from boutique, right?
in a big way.
Yeah.
And, I actually personally would have liked the boutique. I hear what you're saying. I would have preferred the boutique because I know that my family can't.
But the boutique's not going to have that. And,
it's not going to have it,
I've been planning out a big road trip I'm going to be taking with my family. And one place we're stopping on the way back home is Chicago. And, we're only going to be in Chicago for one night. I wanted to get a decent place. And I tend to go to Hilton places because I have a Hilton membership. So, I booked a place in this old Grand Hotel that's pretty nice, but I'm kind of looking at other places if I change my mind. And one was a boutique called the London House, and it seems lovely from a room standpoint.
Yeah.
And from the little, the balcony type things that looks right over the Chicago River and those famous circular buildings. So it's really great, but they don't show a single picture of the lobby in the literature because the lobby's probably almost non-existent.
Right.
You know, whereas
Right.
the lobby of this Grand Hotel where I currently have a reservation, it's this really old historic hotel. It has like huge like wedding reception type place, and then I've looked into another Hilton that's where they had the conventions when there was all that violence in Chicago in the '60s, or was that early '70s, where they had all the violence at the Democratic convention.
Yes, yes.
You know, and that is a grand hotel that the Supreme Court justice who just passed away, his family actually owned it before Conrad Hilton bought it. So, like, there's a difference. And if you want what I wanted, you have to go a certain size. But if you go that boutique, which is what certain people were saying, they wanted to go boutique. Well, they got away from that real quick because they could have done it. They could have done it with the major brands.
Right.
You know.
And then the information and knowledge for whatever they ultimately wanted was available to them during the campaign where we could have. I actually also had a concern with the structure of monies flowing anywhere directly to a nonprofit organization.
That's always dicey, and I think that's the problem they ran into because they were, the redevelopment law and those zones they're pretty clear on that you can only extract givebacks other than certain givebacks that are very clearly in the law. You don't need to be a redevelopment zone to have them, like sewage. Like the impact on the sewage, you're allowed to get from the developer the improvements to the sewage necessary by their development, right? But when it comes to most givebacks in the state of New Jersey, you have to be in a redevelopment zone, and there still has to be that nexus between the zone and the giveback. And it's like, well, a hotel certainly doesn't put students in the schools.
Right.
So they seemed like they were on shaky legal ground, extracting basically.
I mean, I believe they probably just wanted to
money,
settle
an influx of money to the schools when we talk about a hotel.
Because I think I'm obviously not in any meetings, but I know that we kind of backed off on that. They may still feel that they're right. I think that was wrong, and we did again.
But I get worried that there's going to be a repeat of that.
Yeah, the fact that we had one is all we need to know. You know what I mean? Like, it happened already. There was a lot of you vote up and down, you vote up or down, no discussion. Here it is.
Which is
Look,
a ridiculous
all of these.
notion.
This chamber is full of people who are enthusiastic.
Right.
That's the end of it. And the fact that we have that makes me concerned.
Yeah. Let's get on that. Come on, that whole vote up or down. That is such a non-democrat. I mean, you wouldn't have C-SPAN if that was the federal government's attitude.
Right.
People would just go up there. You wouldn't make a C-SPAN channel around people just voting. Like without discussion, without debate. That is the whole point of legislative bodies. It's the point that the public gets to comment on it. That's why I always think that you should vote, unless you have a really extreme reason, you should vote on first reading, because on first reading the public can't comment.
Gets to the discussion.
So let the public discussion happen, unless it's just something silly that you're,
Yeah, just an offensive, I don't know, all women must wear pink underwear.
Right.
Yeah. You should vote that down on first reading.
Right,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, so it's a concern.
Yeah,
it's a concern what's going to happen with this whole thing.
So, but we'll see, and we'll see soon. So, yes, and even the citizenry, but also the council members specifically. You know what I mean? Like, yes, you can talk so much and spend so much time getting feedback that you never get anywhere. I understand concerns about that.
Yeah, you can.
But I'd rather risk that than not like.
Well, it's the old adage that and it's not an adage, but it's just the old frustration that people are like, true democracy is slow. It moves at a snail's pace.
That is true too.
So, anytime you start demanding speed, the realities of the world are you're probably going to lose some of the democratic process. The more speed you get, the less likely you are to have a democratic process.
Right.
And that can be desirable at times, because sometimes some really good things get killed by the slog that is the democratic process, but it seems very hard to not have it.
I agree. You should err on that side if need be. And yes, I mean, ironically, that's one of the reasons that I like the model of a CLT buying properties, because if we're waiting on this 10%, the people in trouble 10 years from now might have some options.
Right.
So, I guess one other thing that's been on my mind, and it hasn't really been vetted anywhere, is the ethics ordinance that's also going to be on the.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about that. I was away, and I mean, I read a little bit about it, but what's that all about?
I don't know much about it. I think I've actually kind of half read it. Half read it meaning it's on for first reading. I'll have time.
Well, it seems to center around the long and short of it to me seems that it's just like, don't use municipal assets, don't use municipal time to do what amounts to politics.
Yes.
And you can't do that. I mean, I know that back when I was running with Dawn, we had an issue with I hope I remember this right. It was an issue with whether one of those mailers that goes out to the community, whether it was too close to election season. And I think Beth Mason was starting to like rattle the saber that I'm going to make a claim that you are using taxpayer dollars for electioneering purposes. And, I don't know exactly how that went down.
Right.
But I believe that our campaign ended up paying
the
cost of one of those citywide
things.
This is what your city's up to mailers.
Right.
For that reason.
Right.
To avoid trouble in that area.
So yeah, whether it was or not.
So
yes.
so it seems pretty established in the law that you're not supposed to do stuff that amounts to like electioneering
in any way, shape, or form.
I might call it propaganda, and stuff like that with city resources. So I mean, it seems to me that that's all that.
It seems to
that
me
ordinance was trying to eliminate.
And who wouldn't support that? Who wouldn't support the idea of you shouldn't be doing any campaign or politicking?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely disappointed to hear that anybody, especially on first reading. It's one thing if you're not going to support it on final vote, but I think something has to be pretty outrageous to not support on first reading, because it's like you're saying I don't think the public should even opine on this, and that seems pretty extreme to do that.
Right. It is, but there might be some, like I'm going to read it again. It's going to go to to second reading, so I'm curious.
So it'll be in the August meeting.
It'll be in the August meeting, and there's 2 council persons who voted against it, so they may have their reasons. It also probably doesn't have teeth, but a lot of what the city council passes doesn't have teeth, so it's got to be something.
There's tons of stuff that we pass that doesn't have teeth.
I think you voted on gun control and climate change and healthcare and a lot of things.
Yeah.
All good, but so it's sometimes to take a stand, know.
Yeah. Although, I never liked when people did that with a national issue like gun control, because it's like, come on.
I get a little uncomfortable too, but okay, it doesn't hurt anything.
Yeah, but you know why that was done. That was done to make Republicans on the council look bad if they didn't vote for it.
Yeah, well, that's.
And that was why that was done. I mean, I don't have any confirmation that that's why that was done, but
Yeah.
My antenna are telling me that's why that was done.
Right. Well, then it fell on its face. It was probably majority. Didn't it pass unanimously, whatever it was?
I don't remember. Yeah. I just remember feeling it was
a little bit
of a silly stage.
But that's actually, if that is the case, that is definitely an example where politics is being used for political purposes that really, obviously there's nothing.
It's also like, if you don't, the taxpayers pay the city council people's salary to keep City Hall open, to keep the lights on, to keep the cameras rolling, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And we shouldn't, I think it devolves when it becomes just, a bunch of city council people making statements on national issues that they don't have any jurisdiction over or control over. And I don't want it to become a thing where people are watching, CNN and responding to the national issues by making meaningless resolutions with zero teeth whatsoever on taxpayer time. And that's kind of what the ordinance seems to be saying, is like, be careful when you're talking about taxpayer dollars and taxpayer paid employees. You shouldn't be doing that stuff on that time.
No, I agree. That's actually different. That is an issue that can impact us here. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times things that we can have no impact on, the council taking a stand on every, it bothers me more if we were trying to embarrass, and we were trying to infuse more partisan politics into our elections. That bothers me more.
Right, and if it's an issue that we don't have control over, but that greatly affects our community, like there's a lot of gun things that would, because we have students and we don't want to see we want to see these shooting. Anybody with a brain wants these shootings to stop and wants to, and they might disagree about how to best and most effectively go about that. But if it's a resolution that just says, we want more to be done to try to
protect the
avoid,
yeah.
school shootings, sure, you should be
Yeah.
doing that. Or, our particular susceptibility to rising tides and sea levels
Right.
is something that I think
That it's actually nice to see council saying,
right.
it's rising tides.
But it gets a little,
yeah.
but sometimes the connection is much looser.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets
well,
a little
and
bit silly.
it's headlines and things like that. I prefer the policy. I certainly don't know what the outcome of the ward elections are going to be.
Right.
It's,
Well, I hope they avoid that tenor that, like we were talking about earlier, that I just hope it doesn't become, the amount that the name Trump was bolted around. I mean, look, I personally think the guy's been an absolute buffoon
Yeah.
and nightmare as a president, but, to try to make that affect your local race.
Well, we shouldn't-
Because somebody's a Republican, like there's nothing wrong with somebody being a Republican.
Right.
I've never been a Republican. I
Neither
tend
have I.
to often disagree with Republicans, but I think somebody can be a perfectly legitimate, civic-minded person that I would be proud to have as a neighbor who's a Republican, and I don't think they should be demonized for that.
right. Well, and also, we have 6 ward races, and Trump isn't running in any of them. So,
Not at all.
so nobody's running against him.
Not at all.
Yeah. So, whatever. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
I hope that doesn't come.
I mean, Hoboken elections just always have traditionally been sort of ugly. I
They
think.
have been in different ways,
Yeah.
but that one got ugly in a weird way, and I guess because I was part of it, it was
Well, you've been a part of them for a long time. Did
Yeah.
you? How did it compare with, earlier races that you were in and whatever?
I think it's mutated. I think that last election cycle was the first election cycle where it really didn't devolve into a born and raised versus the non-born and raised kind of election. I think that's still always an underlying issue, and I certainly ended up running with a mayoral candidate that's pretty popular amongst a set of born and raised people, but I don't think that was anywhere near as big of an issue and as big of a divide as it has been in the past, and I think that's forever at this
Yes.
point. I think we've gotten beyond that being a major issue.
But that could have been a wonderful opportunity for us to have policy disagreements,
Yeah,
and we didn't.
it definitely wasn't wonky enough for my taste, and there wasn't
Yeah.
enough, and,
Well, and there was
and the
just-
campaign I was involved in, I definitely tried to wonk it up on a lot of things,
It's also hard these days. Talking points, catchy phrases,
Well, and it's that identity politics thing that we talked about.
Yeah, not really. I mean,
We could save that for another day, 'cause
Yeah.
that's a big discussion.
yeah.
All right. Well, listen.
Really
Thank
fun,
you for helping me with my experiment here.
Yeah.
I think it went all right. I would have been willing to go live with this, but I think we'll
Watch it first.
We'll watch
and see,
it first.
because we might feel really good about it, and then we'll,
Yeah. No, and I agreed. I'll do full disclosure of this. I agreed to you being my guinea pig to give you approval
Yeah, well,
before I ran. with
I
it.
think we did. Yeah, I think we covered some interesting stuff.
That's good. All right.
Some very, very timely, and
Yeah. So
Let me know how it
hopefully I can say you were my inaugural person on launching
Right.
this, and hopefully we can inform some people a little bit better with these kind
about
of
some
things.
things, and then if it goes well, and hopefully we'll see lots of different faces here
Absolutely.
from all sides, and then
But I'll have you back at some
I
point.
was gonna say closer to the election, bring me back. I'll have more to
Absolutely.
say about that.
All right. Well, take care, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching.